Alright, welcome to another PC Tech video. So if you've watched any of my previous PC Tech videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of the Haswell-era Dell Optiplex systems such as the 7020 and 9020. These are very capable systems. They are more than capable of handling anything I need to do on a computer, software development, video production, even some light gaming, you name it, these are good systems. So here is my premise, that if you need a PC and one of these systems will do the job for you, you can just build it from parts. You can just scrounge things and turn them into a useful computer. So that includes parts that you might have laying around, used parts that you buy fairly inexpensively from eBay, and even just junk that can be salvaged out of the dumpster or wherever. As long as it's reasonably standard, you can probably use it. So this is precisely what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to take a salvaged PC case, something literally that you might find at a garage sale or in someone's trash, put an Optiplex 7020 motherboard in it and a Haswell Xeon processor and some memory and other components, and we will get a really good, useful PC out of that. Okay, let's go. Alright, so here is our case. It is the case from a Compact Presario SR2150NX. So this came out in 2007. It had a Celeron D356 processor. This was an okay system for the time, but obviously this would not be usable by modern standards. So my point in making this video is, imagine that you come across an old PC like this, somebody's cleaning out their attic or it's at a garage sale, or you just find it in the dumpster, and you think, could I build a useful PC in this case? And my point is, yes, you can, and I'm going to show you one way to do it. So this is basically just a standard micro ATX case, standard mounting hole, standard power supply mount, standard drive bays. So that's one thing you should definitely look for is it standard ATX, micro ATX form factor? If it is, that means you will have a lot of flexibility in choosing components and building something inside it. Alright, so as with any old piece of equipment, this case is not without its issues. So the front panel has some problems. The power switch is a plastic tab that has this sort of plastic springy clip thing in it that's starting to crack, and that's not in good shape. Also, the power LED is burnt out. The hard drive LED is very dim. And also there are these sort of silly spring-loaded latches for optical drives. I'm just going to take one out because I'm not going to put an optical drive in here, but I do want front panel USB 3. So we're going to make some changes. What I plan to do about the power switch and the LEDs is that there is this unused piece of plastic here that was, I think, the bezel for like a card reader or something like that. I'm just going to mount a power switch, power LED, hard drive LED, and Dell diagnostic LED right here. That'll be much more functional than, you know, this cheesy stuff that doesn't really work. Alright, so here's what I came up with for the power switch and the indicator LEDs. So I've got power, hard drive, and diagnostic, and I have this push button that'll be the power button. And I think it came out okay, so let me put it into the front panel and see how it looks. Alright, so here are the LEDs and the power switch actually installed back in the front panel, and I think it came out fine, looks relatively neat, should be very functional, definitely an improvement over the broken hardware that we had previously. So, alright, I think we can continue with the build. Alright, so I think our next step is we need to put a motherboard in here. So I have an Optiplex 7020 motherboard that I got from eBay that I'm ready to test, so let's see if that works. Alright, so here we have our Optiplex 7020 motherboard on the bench ready to test, and Ingo is here to help us. So I think everything is connected, so let's see if we can power this thing on. Okay, Dell logo, that's promising. We may have to adjust some BIOS settings. What is it doing? Alright, so as far as I can tell, it seems to be configured correctly to boot from UEFI, which is right. So, alright, let's try to boot. Alright, OS boot logo, good sign. Cool, we're in. Alright, so I'm going to do a little more testing off camera, but I think this thing works. Alright, so I'm doing a test fit of the motherboard in this case, so this is the bottom of the case, and I immediately have a problem. So this is the Harbin Repairs adapter for the 20-pin connector that does the USB to front panel audio and hard drive LED, and because it's designed to hang off of the bottom of the board, that is just not going to physically fit in the case, so I think I'm going to redesign this PCB, make a new version that doesn't hang off the side. Alright, so the basic problem is that there's this 20-pin connector on the motherboard, and if the motherboard sits right up against the bottom of the case, there's really no room for this Harbin Repairs 20-pin adapter to fit because it hangs off the edge of the motherboard. Alright, so here's my solution. I simply redesigned the PCB using the original schematic, and I just moved the connectors around a bit, and it works the same way as the original, but it doesn't hang off the side. And as we will see, this does work. It's okay. There's one issue with it that I will correct by redesigning it again, but this is good enough for now. This actually is going to solve our problem. There is actually a similar issue on the other side of the motherboard. There's this 5-pin connector that connects the power switch, power LED, and diagnostic LED. And the Harbin Repairs adapter PCB for this connector hangs off the side of the motherboard, and so if the motherboard's very close to the power supply, it won't fit. And again, I designed my own modified version of this that doesn't hang off the side. It's not going to be necessary for our Presario case, but nonetheless, it's nice to have these two adapters that fit within the profile of the motherboard, because basically that allows us to use any micro ATX case at all. Alright, so here is our 20-pin adapter PCB in place. This is the redesigned one, and it does indeed clear the bottom of the case, so that's good. The only problem is that it bumps up slightly against this capacitor right here, which is not ideal. It's only just barely touching, so I don't think it's going to cause any actual problems. But what I'm going to do is, the next redesign of this PCB, I think I'll move this connector down here. There should be some room for it, and that way the cutout can completely clear this capacitor. But in the meantime, this is going to work well enough for now. Alright, segue. Now that we have the front panel I/O connectors sorted out, we are ready to build a PC in here, so I will do that, and then when I'm done, I will review what's in here. Alright, so everything is installed in the case, so let me give you a little tour just to show you what's in here. Alright, so this is the bottom of the front of the case, and I have a 92mm fan here as an intake. It was originally the rear exhaust fan, but I mounted it as an intake fan down here for a little extra airflow. It's mounted with some rubber fan mounts. I had to drill a couple of holes into the front, but it worked out okay. And then this right here is the Dell thermal sensor, so I just zip tied that to the front. So, alright, that all looks okay. So when the fan was running full speed, it was way too loud, so I put a buck converter in line between the 12 volts and the fan here, and I've adjusted it so that it runs at a reasonable speed, so generates some airflow, but it's not obnoxiously loud. Alright, so here are our SATA storage devices. So there's a 320 gig hard drive that I pulled out of a broken laptop. And then underneath is a 120 gig SSD that I bought from eBay for $20. So that's pretty reasonable mass storage for this machine. Alright, so pretty basic stuff inside. We have, of course, our Optiplex 7020 motherboard, 4 gig DDR3 modules, standard Dell CPU cooler, standard Dell 92mm case fan. I did just enough cable management that the cables are away from the fans. That's basically how much I do, and then I stop. So, I think overall looks okay. So I should mention under here is a Xeon E3 1275 V3 CPU, which is one of the Haswell Xeons that's essentially equivalent to an i7, so 4 cores, 8 threads. I think it's quite similar to the i7 4770, so, definitely decent CPU. Will certainly handle any task that I need to do. Alright, so here's our Dell power supply. This is the 365 watt version, and if you can, this is a good version to get because it does have the 6-pin connector you can use for GPU power if you have a graphics card that requires that. So I think I paid $30 for this on eBay. And I should mention, the reason that you, in general, probably want to use an actual Dell Optiplex power supply is that these have the cable that connects directly to the Dell motherboard using their proprietary 8-pin connector. So these are decent power supplies, and they're not very expensive, so, easy option. All right, so here on the front panel, I have a 5¼ inch to 3½ inch front panel adapter that I'm using only because it gives me 2 front panel USB 3 ports. I like having USB 3 on the front. And it has a standard cable that plugs into the motherboard. The Dell motherboards have standard USB 3 connectors, so yeah, this works, no problem. All right, so here's one final look at it before we install it. It's not the most beautiful PC ever, but it's fine. Definitely will be useful, and I would say that was the goal. Here we see the computer set up. My plan is to use it as part of my soldering work area, and it will be useful for viewing schematics and datasheets, and also for recording footage of soldering and desoldering when I make videos about electronics projects. It's connected to my home network, so when I record video I can transfer it to my home NAS, which I can also access from my main PC when I am ready to edit. Alright, so to talk a little bit about what you might spend if you wanted to build something like this, I think sort of $250 maybe is in the right ballpark. These are the prices for the individual components, although I didn't actually spend all of this in reality because a lot of the stuff is stuff I already had on hand. CPU, definitely the most expensive item here. If you can go for an i5 type CPU, it's maybe half or even less the price of the one that I used. But in any case, pretty reasonable. The Harbin repairs adapters I didn't really list a price for because those were modified versions that I had fabbed by Oshpark, but you could probably do an order for $20 and solder some connectors on, and you're in business. Alright, so in conclusion, I think old PCs, especially old PCs built out of junk, are inherently more interesting and better than new PCs. I think it's quite satisfying to be keeping useful PC components out of landfills and actually getting use out of them. I think in general it's useful to ask yourself, if you're going to buy a PC, what are your actual requirements? What is your workload? What kind of hardware do you need to handle that workload? And for me, when I ask that question, these older PCs 100% meet my requirements, so that's why I do what I do. One thing I've also noticed in working on PC stuff is that if you are handy with soldering and can crimp custom DuPont cables, that's quite useful when you build PCs because a lot of what goes into building PCs out of these older components is basically adapting one kind of thing to another kind of thing, and so this gives you potentially lots of flexibility in making things work. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. At some point, I'll be back to making actual electronics videos, but for now, take care and see you in the next video.